You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Pax Mahle. We'll talk to Pax about Pax wines, Halcon, and more. We'll taste a Chenin Blanc that Pax brought in to taste for our weekly wine sip. Pascaline Lepeltier would be very happy. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Pax Mahle is an old soul in the new California wine establishment. He made his way to wine country in '97, launched his own winery in 2000, and has been making wine for over 25 years. Pax has changed the way we think about California Syrah and has shown us Chenin Blanc, Trousseau Gris, Gamay Noir, and Vermentino, among others, can flourish in California. He has mentored and influenced a generation of winemakers and now is working on Halcon, his new estate-grown Syrah project. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Pax.
Thank you very much.
All right, so it's great to finally sit down with you.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to sit down and talk to you. I would talk to Patrick Cappiello and say, you guys are, oh, he's too busy. He can't talk to you. So this time I didn't reach out to Patrick. I just DM'd you.
Don't go through my,
hey, you want to do this or not?
The gatekeeper, Mr. Cappiello. Yeah.
So we're talking to Pax live in New York City. First question, what brings you here?
Springtime, time to get the new spring releases into the market, show them to our favorite restaurants and retailers, and sell wine.
Picked a heck of a day. It's gorgeous.
It's something else today. It's really quite nice.
All right. So as I mentioned to you offline, I want you to give our listeners a little context. And what I want you to do is give us a little background on your journey in life and wine that got you to Pax, which is what you're doing today, and embarking on Halcon, which is an exciting thing. Start with, I don't need to start with kindergarten. Start with where and what piqued your interest in wine, because obviously that's something that hit you and you never turned back. And also, you were a pretty young guy in Nantucket, somming and working in hospitality. Yeah. Take me from there, literally East Coast, across.
Gosh. So it was working in restaurants, which was my first exposure to wine and food, and kind of the idea that sitting down and enjoying a bottle of wine and a nice plate of food made at home or in a restaurant it's a lot more than just eating or sustenance. It can be something that is a lot more than that. And once I I started working in restaurants when I was 15. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, and I wanted a boat, and I had to pay for my own boat insurance, and I had to pay for my own gas. And so I got a job washing dishes at a family friend's restaurant. And I would show up at noon, and I would cut 300, 400 pounds of chicken wings. And then I would pound out 400 hamburger patties. And then I would wash the pots and pans. And then I would work the dinner shift washing dishes in the dish station, and I would be there until everybody was done, and then I would mop the floor, and then my mom would come pick me up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Never overwhelmed or complaining?
Me?
Yeah.
I was just happy to be there.
Nice.
And so, that's certainly not a lot of fine wine being drunk in the dish station, but eventually I moved to Nantucket.
Why?
After high school, I had friends that had a family, friends, neighbors that had summer place on Nantucket, and they would go like every year. It would be like, "Where are you guys going again?" They're like, "Oh, we go to this island Nantucket," and I'd be like, "What?" And so one year I went with them, and ended up moving there. Lived there for off and on for almost 10 years. But
Wow.
but that's
It's impressive, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you were taken by it.
oh yeah. It's a special place,
Yeah.
And when you leave and you go back, and you're on the Cape Air flight, and you're the little 8-seater, and you're coming in like right as you're about 100 feet off of the runway, you can just feel the energy of the island. It's there,
Still like that.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't been back in a couple of years, but we're due. But anyway, so working on Nantucket, I was 17, 18 years old, and working in restaurants, and I just kind of got the bug. I would help the SOM unpack boxes and do inventories, and just kind of like learning from everybody that I could. There was a really great mentor who I ended up working for on Nantucket, who was in restaurants, and then opened his own retail store. And he was a kind of an icon in the industry, and was a very good teacher in the fact that he, taught me to be very open-minded, and in an industry that is extremely myopic. He was a really good
More then than now, even.
Yeah, probably, yeah, for sure. I mean, California wine wasn't even really in the conversation back in the mid '90s when I was.
Right.
I mean, of course, there was great wines being made, but they weren't part of the, But anyways, so I kind of got the bug then, and just kind of continued that path, wanting to work and wanted.
Is that guy still around? That person?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
was he enough of an influence to like, hey, I like him, I like what he's doing, I like wine, so let's go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was both a mentor to my wife and myself. We weren't married at the time; we were just dating, and she worked for him, and then he opened a store, and I ended up working for him there. And but yeah, that was where it started. And then studying like opening a chapter and like learning appellations and soils.
Self-taught.
And yeah, exactly. And then was kind of studying to be in the Master Sommelier program, and really thought that was the direction I wanted to go. And then the more time I kind of spent doing that, the more I realized I didn't want to like put wine on a pedestal. I wanted wine to be, I was driving across country and ended up in Napa, and I went to Sunshine Market, which is now like the local market that we go to all the time. But I went in to get, my wife and I were just like our first time in Napa Valley. This is like 94, 95.
Was that a visit trip?
A visit, yeah, it was a visit.
That wasn't when you headed out.
No, that was a visit.
Okay.
That was a visit, and I went to a grocery store, and I was waiting in line at the market, and there was a guy in front of me who was a grape grower, and a guy behind me that was a grape grower, and his wife, and they were talking about fruit set and yields and all of these mundane conversations that I have commonly in grocery stores now. But I was just like standing between these two people that were talking about grapes as it was part of their life. It wasn't like this like
That was cool for you.
cherished like special. It was just like it was their life, and I was like, that's the connection I want. I want to.
So that moment, that was a big moment.
Yeah.
Everything leading up to that was pointing that way, but that gave you the
It was
vibe,
a
right?
conversation in a grocery store. Yeah,
That's crazy.
and it was later on in that trip we worked our way up, and we were in Anderson Valley, and it was 4th of July, and we were sitting on a picnic table at what's that great little winery in Anderson Valley. Anyways, there's this fruit stand called No, they make the non-alcoholic juice.
Martinelli.
No. Anyways, it'll come to me when if I'm digging for it, it won't come. But if I stop talking, yeah, exactly. Anyways, there's a little fruit stand that we still go to. It's called Gowan's, and we got these peaches, and we were sitting there on the picnic table eating these peaches at this winery, walking over Anderson Valley, and I was like, I think we should live here, and she was like, yeah, we should. So that was it, the peach. And
So the conversation in the peach.
yeah, the conversation in the peach.
So that was 94. You obviously go back and then ready to pack up and head west.
Yep, that's exactly
Take
right.
me from there.
Yeah, so we packed up and moved to Santa Rosa in 1997. There was 4 of us in the house, a couple from Arizona that we were friends with, another mentor, guy that taught me a lot about wine. Worked in his wine bar, worked for him at the Phoenician Resort, and then worked for him at his own wine bar in downtown Scottsdale. Great guy, really knowledgeable, really helped, teach me a lot about wine as well. And we all lived in the house together, 2 couples, and all kind of got jobs. 6 months later, we kind of went our separate ways because of the jobs we ended up getting.
They weren't wine people.
They were wine people.
They
One
were.
was a chef, and one the other is a wine guy.
Okay.
He's still in the area, still in wine, we. I got a job working at the Dean and DeLuca Corporation, and I was just a guy on the floor selling wine, and eventually kind of created a role for myself where I would travel around.
What year was that?
97.
So that was before even Napa blew up and Dean and DeLuca had everybody's wines. You were transitioning into that.
Well, yeah.
That was a place to get all the wines from there.
Yeah. That was my job.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't just me. There was my boss was John Hardesty, and one of my best friends, who's still one of my best friends, who lives back in Europe right now, Didier Lusto. Him and I and John kind of started that and ran that program for quite a while. And then I started traveling to the other Dean and DeLucas, and my job was to kind of like convert, because I didn't really have a knowledge of California wine, and I kind of had to like figure it out in my mind how how to set the store up, and like where's the Pomerol of Napa, where's the Chablis of Napa, where's the Meursault, where's the Yarra Valley, so in setting up the store, that's kind of how I got into thinking about it. And so once the Dean and DeLuca store was kind of going gangbusters, I started traveling around to the different Dean and DeLucas and doing the same thing, kind of getting rid of all of the European wine and converting it to a California only program.
So their focus was California wine because they were in Napa. It wasn't
Correct.
important to have a big Bordeaux or even Burgundy section.
No.
You needed to discover. And
Yeah.
everything was really starting to pop then, right?
Yeah, I think it was a bold statement. I think it was, it wasn't easy for our DC store to convert because it was on M Street, and it's a very industrial or international city.
Right. It's a global location.
Yeah, for sure. But it was a bold statement, and I think really an important one. I'm not a big fan of, like our mutual friend Patrick Capiello talking about, well, it's an Italian restaurant, so we're only going to sell Italian wines. It's like, well, but it's an Italian American restaurant. There's more Italian Americans than there are Italians.
I get what he's doing, but I agree with you. You have enough Italian, but there's room
for other things. And so, admittedly at the time, I wasn't really sure it was the right thing to do, particularly when it comes to sparkling wines and champagnes. But now, of course, there's great wines being produced in California, all over California, that are sparkling, that rival some champagne. So, that argument, or, that's not even a sticking point anymore. But it was, in retrospect, I think it was the right thing for them to do. And I'm proud to be a part of it.
I think time and place. Before we move from Dean and DeLuca forward, can I go backwards for a second? When did you meet Pam?
Him and I met.
And, I don't know her, but everyone I know who knows her, just has this kind of deeply good feeling about her. What influences? So you met her, and think about from that point to now, the influences she had on you, just the type of person she is, maybe how she thinks about business.
Yeah. You met her in Nantucket? Met her on Nantucket, yeah. I met her in 1991 on Nantucket.
Where's she from?
She's from Buffalo, New York.
Okay. Good upgrade, Nantucket from Buffalo.
Yeah. And we met in 91. I moved to Arizona. She and my sister moved to Arizona few months later. And
were they friends?
Oh yeah, they're best friends.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I met Pam, through my sister.
Okay.
And that was 95 or something. And we, started dating then. And
Silly question. When you met her, did you know like this is somebody, or
I-
it took a little time?
Yeah, I mean, I always say it. I've said it before. It's like that day. I mean, I think it was 91. We were at the beach, and she was with my sister and my sister's boyfriend, and they worked together, and they were at the beach, and I rode my bike out to the beach, and I was like, and I kind of remember saying at the time and thinking it was really a weird thing for me to think, because as a, what was I, 24-year-old,
Right.
like
Untethered.
Yeah. I wasn't really thinking about getting married, but I was kind of like, yeah, she's the one that I would marry for sure. And yeah, we didn't get married until 2005.
Wow.
But
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we married.
But together, together, not on and off.
Come 97, when we moved to California, we were living together and started the business together. And, I think an interesting question. It's great that you're asking these questions. No one's really asked me that about Pam, but she, when, you brought up that picture of that bottle of Syrah you drank at Blackberry Farm, that was kind of like I was very young, definitely swinging for the fence. And, you only have one chance, one chance of vintage. And like that was my third vintage. Or no, my fourth vintage. And, I think it was kind of a big turning point, because Pam was like, she didn't want to drink the wines. The wines were too big for her. And it was her that kind of brought me back to reality, and was kind of like, these aren't the wines that we, that we drink. These aren't the wines.
She was more aware of that than you were?
She was, yeah. Because
that was, I asked you what were some of her influences.
Yeah.
Straight up.
That
was that. And that's important.
It's very important.
She took the right road on that one.
She certainly did.
Yeah.
She certainly did. And I didn't see it because I was so, entrenched, right? You can't see the forest through the trees. Sometimes it's hard to stand back and kind of take that over.
When you're in it,
Yeah. And so that was a big point, because in 2005 we really did get the opportunity to pick grapes that were fully ripe at lower alcohol and higher natural acidities.
You sought out what you wanted to make.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the vintage lent itself to that. It was really at a right time. And the wine, and then that was the big shift, was seeing those wines and how those wines tasted, and how they evolved in barrel, and how they tasted in bottle, and how they just kind of continued to just kind of blossom. And that was just like a really big, when I was in, the first couple of vintages, it's like there was just rules. You didn't argue with them. It was, you pick. The fruit as ripe as possible, and you add water, and then you add acid, and then, you do all this stuff. I mean, the wines were always whole cluster. They were always, organic vineyards. They were always whole cluster. They were always crushed by foot. But that was me. And then the other side of was what was what I thought had to be done in California, based on the people who were around me and teaching me and everything.
But I was going to ask you that later, and I think you're going there. You had an experience when you were making wine. It may be backwards from where we're at now.
It's like Pulp Fiction. We start in the
which is
end,
fine.
and then go
I'm
to the
fine
middle.
with that, because I can maneuver it. But it was just a typical total manipulation in the cellar. I don't even want to talk about what happened in the vineyard. Let's just talk about the cellar. I mean,
well, we always sought out organic vineyards. So, but
that just rubbed you the wrong way. I mean, that was an awakening. Like, for sure, this is how it's done. I'm out of here. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And in 2005, when we were able to pick these very, fully mature ripe grapes with great flavor, that didn't need to have acid added and didn't need to have water added, and the wines were so much better. And that was the turning point. That was the point where I was like, well, I don't want to add water anymore, and I don't want to add acid anymore, and and that was the, come 05, 06. From that point on, it's been a very conscious effort. Every decision is made in the vineyard and in the growing process and the harvesting to make sure that we're picking fruit that does not need to be augmented.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to finish the chronology, because I want to move to other stuff, you started your namesake winery around 2000.
Yep.
And we're talking about a point 4 or 5 years later when you're
Yep.
making wine, a realization, the vineyard, what influenced
Yep.
you and all that. One of the things that confuses me, and take me through it quickly, is wasn't there like this Pax wind gap back to Pax?
Mm-hmm.
Just take me through that episode quickly, because I think some people associate you, more than some, with wind gap.
Yeah, of course. So it's really quite simple, believe it or not. We had a partner, my wife and I had a partner in Pax, and very good businessman, very hard worker, just a different moral code maybe, but we were getting to a point, 2007, 2008, the economy was, really on its way down. There's so much bad Syrah on the market that people were very confused by Syrah. Syrah sommeliers were buying it, but people weren't buying it. Eric Asimov had an article those horrible jokes
What's that
about
famous joke he made?
like what's the difference between a case of syphilis and a case of Syrah? You can get rid of a case of syphilis,
Right.
which I always refuse to say. That's kind of like the name Voldemort or whether, you never say it.
It's a good
but,
one, though.
But it kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy because we were like, well, gosh, everybody keeps writing these stories that we can't sell Syrah, and we're selling Syrah pretty good. And then next thing you know, we couldn't sell Syrah either because it became
Changing time.
Yeah. And so, we made too many wines, most likely, and some of those wines were from the cold coast of Sonoma, and some were like mountain vineyards. And the bigger wines, the mountain grown wines, the bigger, more extracted, more powerful wines were getting higher scores from Bob Parker. And so my partner thought, why don't we eliminate that side, the cold stuff, the lower scoring stuff, and just
He
focus.
was Parkerized a little, your partner, right?
Your words, not mine, but he
were my words.
He wanted to.
Well, you're sitting across from me.
Yeah. He wanted to focus on the wines that were easier to sell. And so it was a conscious decision. It was very upsetting for me because.
But you were pretty firm and stayed in this is where I want to go. That wasn't it, So you were willing to. You parted ways, right?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay. I'm rushing you. Sorry. I'll drink some more wine. Go ahead.
So we, culled, a handful of vineyards and, officially dropped the vineyards and we're refocusing, a little bit tighter focus on the Pax brand. And, a month or two goes by and I was like, and this is one of the things, people were telling me, I'd come to the market in New York City or I'd be somewhere else and they'd say, you see a bottle of Syrah and it says Syrah from California, Syrah from Pax. You don't know what style it's going to be. You don't know if it's going to be, peppery and light and fresh and Northern Rhone style, or not that Northern Rhone wines are that way anymore either, or if you don't know if it's going to be like a very Australian style or Shiraz.
Yeah.
And so I was that kind of, I don't really think that is a valid argument, but it was something that people kept saying. And so I thought, kind of like with the Chenin Blanc labels now, they're lighter and brighter and they kind of foretell kind of the style of the wine. And so I thought, well, hey, if all these great Syrah vineyards we've been working with for the last 5, 6, 10 years, are all still available because nobody's looking for Syrah. Why don't we start a brand that is just that and celebrates that as a very important part of California? And it's not about a style, it's about a place. this is where everything started getting confusing, because it's like, oh, Pax had a change of heart, or everything is low alcohol. It's like, no, those wines were always produced 12% alcohol wines, no matter where. When we bottled them under the Pax 1.0, they were still 12% alcohol. But when we launched Wind Gap, the idea would be to celebrate the cold climate Syrah vineyards, and so it was done to complement what we were doing at Pax. To be like, Pax is going to celebrate the bolder, richer, really true California kind of sunshine, brightness, intensity. And then the Wind Gap wines were going to, celebrate the fact that you can make beautiful wines from these cold climate vineyards that are naturally lower in alcohol and naturally higher in acid. And that was the plan. And
did it play out that way?
I reached out to the growers and said, hey, I understand that you've recently been let go from your contracts, and was wondering if any fruit was available. If it was, please, it was all done on the up and up, and started Wind Gap. And my partner took it as a betrayal. And so he fired me and sued me in
What year was that?
2008.
Fired you and sued you from your partnership?
Yep. Yep.
And do you go with a fight, or you realize, here's my time to sever?
No, fuck that.
Right.
No, I fucking destroyed them.
You did.
Yeah.
It's just your nature.
I mean, it was a very long, very protracted bullshit that is no,
2-3 years, or
a couple years,
couple
yeah.
years?
Yeah, but I don't want to put energy into it. It's not something I want to talk about. It's ancient history, But yeah, no, we've fought to dissolve the business, and uncovered all the reasons why it should. And
So
I think I'm sitting here today talking about wines with my name on them. So obviously it's pretty clear who emerged
I was going to
victorious.
say, what emerges from that, and what strength comes from that, and that's that you're sitting here with control,
Yeah.
with your name on it,
Exactly.
doing what you want, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a pretty good ending, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. But to be clear, I was never hamstrung. He was a very good partner in regards to allowing me to just kind of be creative and do what I wanted to do, and he did his thing. So it was a good partnership in that way.
All right, so that's the end of a chapter. From there to here, it's Pax, and we'll get into that a little.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out, where did this love or attention to Syrah come from?
Yeah.
Did a bottle fall out of the sky, hit you in the head? You looked at it and go, okay.
Yeah, it was just the first bottle.
There's nothing you've told me historically,
Yeah.
like the two people that kind of mentored or influenced.
Yeah.
You didn't say these were big Ronists, or but how'd that come about?
Yeah, well, both of them are. Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them are well, but they're just, both of these guys, both Michael and Greg, both just really just true, wine, lovers, and
Right.
wine educators, and so of course they have a love for the great wines of the Northern Rhone Valley, just like they do for Burgundy, and just like they do for any other great
If
region.
you know your stuff,
Yeah.
that's in the mix.
100%. And so, yeah, I think it was just that exposure, the first case of wine I ever bought was a case of 95 Chateau Pavé. And, like everybody else that's young and getting into things, we start with Cabernet, and then we start figuring out that, that Pinot Noir is king and Burgundy is where it's at. And then you start figuring out that, there's other things, and,
Were you even thinking of Barolo then? Or
Oh,
not?
yeah. I mean, I still
What'd you say the Pavé was, a 95?
95,
Is that
yeah.
a decent vintage? I'm
It was
just
good.
curious.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. And it was before it was purchased and before it became a kind of an Uber Bordeaux. It was a lot more classic and Saint-Emilion based, Merlot based kind of prettier wine, but now it's a monster.
So people around you, people in the know, knew, the Rhone was important, and
Yeah.
Syrah-based
Yeah,
wine.
and so
you had your ample exposure
Yeah,
to it.
and so one of my jobs working at the retail store on Nantucket was, I would open bottles of wine on a Friday, and and this guy had a really cool thing. Like, he didn't sell, I'd say, and this is a totally made up number, of course, but I'd say like what 80% of wine that's made is in this like $25 to $50 price range, and then there's, that's like almost everything is in this price range. And he didn't sell any wine in that price range. Wow. He sold like under 20, like floor stack, delicious, chuggable, like,
that's an art, man.
Like Fonsalot Rouge, like Lirac Blanc, like all these things that used to just be floor stack. And then
that's more impressive.
And then the high end. So it was like all the cheap stuff. I mean, cheap, high quality stuff, and
less expensive.
Yeah. And then like the top of the top. So it was like we would have. I mean, I remember we had like Chateau de Tours or like Pielade, which is like the fourth wine of Reyes. The Pielade was like $9.99. And we would like floor stack it on Nantucket, and then we would have verticals of Reyes in the back, and so that was his goal. His goal was the affordable stuff, the values, the daily drinkers, and then the special wines. He was like everybody else that can muck around with the other stuff. So anyway, so I wanted to drink like an off-dry Chenin Blanc and a really good goat cheese, we would sell cases of that wine and a bunch of that cheese. And so once I kind of started doing these things myself, I was just always reaching for great bottles of Syrah because that's what I was kind of fascinated by it. So, when I moved to California, Michael Havens made gorgeous Syrah from the Hudson Vineyard. Aaron Jordan was making wine for Nyers from the Hudson Vineyard.
Was she at Nyers?
Yeah.
They were making good Syrah then?
Oh, yeah.
Because of her, and was it his vineyards or he contracted?
Bruce Nyers still is the owner of that, and he was the he worked for Kermit Lynch for 50 years.
Wow.
And he and Aaron Jordan worked together at Joseph Phelps Vineyards, I believe. And so when Aaron got back from the Rhone Valley, he was hired to be the winemaker. Bruce hired him to make the wine at Nyers. I think Helen made the first vintage or two, and then he did. Anyway, so they were making great wines, and of course down south, like Adam Tolmack, the Ojai wines, I loved. John Albin was just getting started; his wines were coming onto the market. Krankel's wines were getting into the market, and I was just really enamored with Syrah. I just thought I thought the climate, I thought what was going on with it. I thought it was kind of somebody should be focusing on it. And my job at Dean and DeLuca was tasting all of these wines, to buy these wines, to put them into the store. And in tasting things, and like Tom Dellinger made all sorts of Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs and a delicious cold Syrah or a Cabernet, and he had this little Syrah that he made, but it stood out to me. And there was other people.
I still have some old.
Yeah, me too. And I buy barrels from them. They use a lot of new barrels. I don't use new barrels, but I use their twice used barrels they sell me, and so it's a great relationship. So I just, in tasting through these wines, and again back to that thing about Dean and DeLuca, where I was trying to figure out what's the Southern Rhone, what's the Northern Rhone, and I just felt that the wines from the North Coast of California, Sonoma Coast, I thought that those wines were, to me, interesting. And at this time, Turley Wine Cellars was just on fire. You couldn't get a bottle of Turley's Zinfandel unless your brother knew somebody.
And the Hain Petit Syrah, the library stuff, and all that.
Yeah.
I have so much of it.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I have stuff from the '90s, and is that stuff still good?
Yeah. Okay. I actually tasted through some of those recently with Tegan. But anyway, so I was like, somebody should focus on all of these terroirs of Syrah on the North Coast and kind of do what Turley's doing and bottle, vineyard designated Syrahs from the North Coast.
Nobody was kind of locked in that idea then, right?
Yeah.
It was a good move.
Yeah, so that's what I did. Well, I don't know,
No, that was a good move. Doesn't Tegan sort of do that now too?
I think Tegan's more driven by place. He's really
fair enough.
He's really I guess that's what my whole point was place too with Sonoma. But Tegan is he's with his own wines. Obviously what he's doing with Turley, that's a job he's paid to do. But with his
Sandlands.
With his own wines, I think he's it's not all Lodi. He's got stuff at Amador. He's got stuff on the Sonoma coast. So he is,
Jumping
I think he's just interested in kind of like a lot of us are, and just kind of the diversification of not only styles of wine in California, but varietals in place.
Varietal, I agree.
Because it's like, there's a lot of,
I agree.
a lot of undiscovered things still in California wine history.
All right, I before we get into a lot of specific stuff, I want to get your take on some general stuff. You've been in California for a quarter of a century already. I want to get your take on how wine has changed in 5, 10, 15 years. I know that's a silly general question, but in relationship to this interview, my interests, to me, there was some kind of change or revolution 5, 10 years ago where guys like you dug in and, were effective.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say, that's one of the changes? Tell me a little about that and other things you've observed.
Yeah. I mean, it's the pendulum, right? I mean, things were just getting too much, and it's like, there's something to be said for that style of wine that is, very, the interesting thing is like, it's, this style of wine that is like concocted. It's like, it's very high in alcohol. It's got a lot of sugar. It has very little acid. It has very little tannin, and it has very little sense of place. And it's just kind of this like Snickers bar melted into a glass.
Like the C word in Napa.
Yeah. Well, that's the sad thing, right? Because, you can get that in a $14 bottle of junk at the store, or you can spend $1,400 on a bottle that says Napa on it that tastes exactly the same. Of course, the pendulum is swinging back now, and a lot of people in Napa are, they're not quite, going, quite as far, and the wines are, back to having a little bit more freshness. But yeah, for a while there, it was getting, slightly out of hand. But that's, I think, where you start realizing, and listen, here's the thing, like if you were drinking a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pop and it was 12% alcohol, it'd be like, what's going on here? But if you're drinking a bottle of Pommard, or you're drinking a bottle of Beaujolais, or you're drinking a bottle of something that's 12% alcohol, it's like, okay, I mean, it's so easily accepted in established wine growing regions that things are different there. But it's like you start doing something. I mean, California is massive. California is almost the size of France, right? I mean, the difference from the
people forget how big Mendocino is.
Yeah, you think of the difference between the coast of California and the a mountain in Napa. I mean, there's a reason the wines taste different. It's because they're very, very different, and it's infuriating that people think that I'm doing something outlandish on the Sonoma coast by making 12% alcohol Syrahs, but it's like, that's what it is on the coast, So, I think the desire to unearth that style of wine was to prove the diversity in California wine, that you can make great, fresh, zippy white wines or red wines from the Sonoma coast or the Mendocino coast or the South Central coast, and you can make big, bold, ripe wines in California but they can both exist together because in Burgundy or in France, they all coexist together. You would never, no one would ever argue with Chablis tasting like a Southern Rhone white. You know what I mean? It's like, what you're getting, and that's understood. And it's that's like, you can't say like, oh, French white wine is this, because French white wine is there's a whole world of wine in just that one category. And California has the ability to do the same thing. And that was the kind of, I think, the impetus for people like me, Duncan, who worked with me, who started his brand, Arnott Roberts. They're crushing it. They're like making these like beautiful gorgeous, like see-through, transparent, beautiful wines. And, they're not like dying on this hill of low alcohol or whatever. They're just making classic wines. And I'd like to think that that's what all of us are doing.
But there's a thread there, and all of us seems to be like small producers.
Yeah.
Those are the people that had the commitment, followed it, and pushed it forward. Is this system stacked against small producers? Or,
well, I mean,
has it kind of come out of that?
Hey, look, when we Charles Bankson bought into WinGap and we were going to, turn WinGap into a 30 or 50,000 case brand, the market just didn't want it. People want people want melted Snicker bars. They don't want herbaceous light,
What about, I would think you know him pretty well. He's a friend of mine. He's probably a friend of yours. What about a guy like Dan Petrosky's Massacon getting bought by a Gallo?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm sitting with you. I don't care about what other people. I'm curious what you think.
I think it's very telling.
In what way?
Well, I mean, I think, and believe that, hey, this opinion is worth every penny you're paying for it.
Okay.
I think it proves that, it's easier for Gallo. Well, look, Gallo's massive, right? They're a good company. They're privately owned. I buy all of my glass from Gallo. I used to be one of the only people now.
It said Gallo glass. I wonder, is that Gallo? It is, right?
Yeah. We didn't want to buy wine from Mexico or China or France anymore. We wanted to buy California glass. And so when we started WinGap, that's what we started with back in 2006. So since 2006, and then with the Pax wines in 2010 became all Gallo. So WinGap was always Gallo or USA glass, and then we started in 2010 for the Pax brand, and now we're still all Gallo glass. So, anyways, Gallo, I think they did these things where they would make like these like high end products within the company, and I think people just had a hard time paying the money or whatever. I think it's easier for Gallo to buy
acquisition,
to
keep the
name and grow it and scale it. And I mean, I think it's also really important.
That's a good point.
I think it's what's really also really important is I think there is a tremendous groundswell for lighter, fresher, drier, higher acid white wines, no matter where in the world. I mean, white wine right now
this plays right into that.
White wine is outselling red wine. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
As long as they're not interfering with Dan, then it's a good relationship.
Sounds like they're making everything easier for him.
Yeah, maybe giving him more resources.
Oh,
in
God,
that
yeah.
sense.
Exactly.
One last general wine thing. And this has always intrigued me, and I understand it pretty well, but I want to get your take. The effects that social media has on wine.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's good. I promote the show.
Yeah.
I find discovery from winemakers, somms. There's a lot of BS out there.
Sure.
But do you see that today as a positive? Is it handled
100%.
correctly?
Well, it is what it is, right? It's like you can't say, yeah. I mean, you can't say something's bad because of its worst parts. But
right.
Yeah, but back to your thing about this shift, I think, back in the early 2000s, there were two kings that dictated what America and the world drank in California. And that was the Wine Spectator and that was Bob Parker. And they favored the luxurious, the big, the rich, the
opulent.
Exactly. And so
high alcohol.
Yeah. Once social media, once you could get information from other people your age, once you could get information, once you could see what other people are drinking, once you could learn so quickly just by picking up your phone and scrolling about these different appellations and what these things are. Once the information became available, readily available, people sought it out. And so that was the.
So I call that two things, and tell me if you agree. The democratization of wine.
Yes,
It wasn't
absolutely.
just two dudes.
For sure.
And kind of peer to peer. Like if the peer was Michael Engelman from The Modern,
Yep.
you'd say, I trust this dude.
Yeah.
And he's saying this.
Exactly.
That became available, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really opened up.
Right.
So I don't want to dwell on this answer too long, but do we see any major negatives?
We do, yeah, because look at Patrick Cappiello and what he's doing on the internet right now with trying to get people to drink more American wine. And there's this thing where it's this like braggadocious, like, ooh, I'm drinking a bottle of Rougeard, or ooh, I'm drinking a bottle of Allemande, or ooh, I'm drinking a bottle of Rouleau. There's this like very like there's cool things to put out on your forward facing thing that make you seem sophisticated and moneyed and sexy, and that is that's boring. It's like it's not interesting.
I agree, because there's some great Rougeard Cab Franc replacements.
Yeah, well,
but that's
listen, it's not the
but
point.
That goes to every category.
Of
fashion,
course. Yeah. Well,
cars.
Listen, wine is fashion.
Yeah,
then that proves
it. Could be a luxury product.
It is.
It is. Lifestyle thing.
But listen, the reality is that we already know that Rougeard's good. We already know that Rouleau is good. And I'm not, I don't.
That's an insecurity on that guy's part to post that.
Exactly.
So you have to live through that.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I think people should be a little bit more brave. I think people should be a little bit more. And I love what Patrick's doing with these, promoting of.
What? I love it because it's a good idea and it's a sincere spokesperson.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's
for sure. And he's right. Where sales are down, things are bleak out there right now.
You know what? To me, it's not just an attaboy and like, thanks, Patrick, for doing that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. So, all right. So we have to take a quick break. We're talking to Pax Mahle. When we come back, we're going to talk about his wines, what he's making, how he makes them, his new project. So you're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network with Pax Mahle. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Pax Mahle.
What up, what up?
All right, so before we talk about the wines, I kind of want to talk about the community that you've created and really the actual space.
Yeah.
Because more than an observer, I'm a podcaster, I'm embedded in wine. I look at this stuff. You really have this kind of cool sort of winemaking space and community.
Yes.
That's not just yours. Your web of influence is wide. Let's talk about some of the winemakers that are currently, sharing the space, and even talk about some of the peeps from the past. Set it up for me. It's really like this indoor, outdoor, open, wine.
Yeah.
It's unique. It's not the only one that does it, but it is pretty unique.
Well,
and I think it goes back to you and maybe even Pam,
Sure. It's two things, what it is now and what it was traditional or historically. So starting out, trying to find, a high quality individual that was going to, work for next to nothing, work in horrible conditions and very long hours and
stage.
Yeah. I'm falling apart, because it's such a physical job, it's very, very physical. And so, in hiring people, you want to make sure that you're hiring the best, and those people that are the best typically have, goals and things that they want to accomplish. And so you find these people, and, like my first assistant was Duncan Myers, who has, as we brought up earlier, Arnott Roberts make some of the best wines in California, if not, some of the best wines in every category, in my opinion. But Duncan and his partner Nathan were making a little bit of wine in Nathan's basement. When Duncan started with me, I gave them the opportunity to make the wine in the facility, and they started doing that. Duncan was replaced, first Ryan Glab came on and worked with Duncan and I for a couple of years, because that was like...
What years are we talking?
So Duncan started in 02, 03.
Okay.
At the end of
20 years ago. 20 plus years.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then Ryan started, I think Ryan started in 07. And I think Duncan's last year was 08. No, that's not true. I think Duncan's last vintage was 07. But Ryan's first vintage was 07. So I guess we only overlapped for a year and a half or so. And then Ryan started Rhyme, bringing grapes. Him and his wife, Megan, started making Rhyme cellars in the facility. And
I know you're going to mention more.
Yeah.
But typically, take Rhyme and Duncan. At some point, they're running both. They're working with you, and
Yes.
they're getting their own gig started.
Yes,
Is that
exactly.
a typical setup?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So I'm
Ryan-
providing them with, space, tank space, barrel storage space, access to things, helping them find grapes, that sort of stuff. Of course, they could have done it all on their own, but they just, maybe, had a nice head
And
start.
never bothered by that. Like, Jesus, I'm busy. Why am I searching for grapes for these guys? Kind of your pleasure, like a dad, right?
Oh yeah, sure. But I mean, again, these guys are their own thing. They're not. They would have been fine without me.
Right.
Yeah. And then after that, there was Scott Schultz, who started Jolie Lade, and then Jamie Motley, and then who's her brand Motley.
Plus, didn't she go on?
She did. She went on to work at Stony Hill for a bit.
Right.
And then after Jamie, up to current time, is Rosalind Reynolds, who is my current assistant, and she has a small brand called Emmy.
Getting nice notices.
Oh yeah, their wines are delicious, tiny amounts, of just like really beautifully crafted wines. So yeah, that's and Rosalind's like an exceptionally hard worker, and not only in promoting her own wines, but in working for us. And so that was kind of always what it was, with kind of this incubator kind of thinking or kind of deal. Once we leased the facility in Sebastopol, and we kicked Wingap out, we had space. We had bills to pay. And so, we brought in Carlo Mondavi, who's a good friend, who makes the Rain wines. Yeah, they're all from the Sonoma coast, and they needed a facility that they could process their fruit in that was closer to their vineyard sources. And so now we have people that are that function independently of us in the cellar. So it's a little different now than the incubator kind of thing with bringing people up.
It's more of a logistic scheduling thing.
Yeah, that's my job basically these days, is logistics. But yeah, so we currently have Patrick, of course, making the Monterey wines. Rosalind makes the Emmy wines.
Sarah?
I'm sorry?
Sarah Morgenstern, does she make?
No. Syrah and Jen, they make their wines in
Outside?
Healdsburg.
Okay.
In the old Rhyme space.
But Patrick has kind of upped his, SKUs and output, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's Monterey, Rain, Martha Stuman, and Rosalind Emmy wines at the facility now. And those are, other than friendly advice or unwarranted advice, if you were to ask my wife, they're pretty independent they're independent. They're not like under my tutelage.
Right.
Although, I do kind of make sure that things are flowing in a certain manner, because a lot of people are dependent on that happening.
Right. Plus, the space requires that.
Yeah.
Would you say a common thread of all these people is creativity. These are creative people with great ideas,
Yeah.
Passionate,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
which is something that you share with them, they share with you. I
Yes.
think that's obvious, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. 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 Oh no, it is very communal in that regard. There is a shared responsibility of, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, shared
Who's
responsibility.
making what?
Yeah,
Who's
of course.
cleaning what?
Oh yeah. 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 I mean, it takes a village.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's really a nice thing. I think Eric Asimov did an article during the pandemic. The two things about the article was it talked about the community,
Yeah.
but it also talked about how working during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But it was kind of an ideal place.
Yeah. Well, it's
because
funny.
it was kind of semi-outdoor, mostly outdoors.
Well, it's funny because the all the photography and all of the interviews were all done in 2019, and and then
That's funny.
and then the article got shelved because it was really in poor taste to do a article on a
Right.
communal winery.
That's
And then so Eric, being the brilliant writer that he is, was like, "Oh, we're changing it up, and how do you manage to work in a communal space during COVID?" And so then we got re-interviewed.
That's a good side story. That's a good side story.
Yeah.
It's a very admirable setup. I'm just curious, and don't take a long time to answer this. Do people contact you about, hey, can I make wine there?
Yes.
Is there room, just to keep kind of the cash flow going to bring people in? I mean, how do you look at it that way?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have people that reach out and they're like, "Hey, I'm just getting out of, I've been making wine here, making there. I really want to start my own brand, and so I want to come work for you." It's like, no, that's not how this works.
Right. Ton of that. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point you're a pretty good judge. All right, let's talk about what you're doing. I've been doing this podcast 6-7 years, and how I perceive and think about wine has changed and grown because of this podcast.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a clinic, sitting with guys like you and all the hundreds of others. And one of the most common threads on this podcast recently, and then I realized forever, with winemakers, because I talk to somms, authors, critics like Eric and all of that, is that the best wines are first made thoughtfully in the vineyard, and not just the vineyard, but trying to represent that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a fair description of what you do.
Mm.
But also, you make wine with dozens of relationships, contracted, rented, I don't know what the word is, all over the place and everything. Tell me about, your farming, which in the end is pretty simple. And your relationships with these guys, what you demand of them, and are you on the ground with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we're going to get to Halcon in a little bit. And
Sure.
That's a little different than what I'm asking you now.
Sure, of course it is. Well, I'll tell you, what's the joke about the dad bull and the baby bull standing up on the hill, and the little bull says, like, "Look at all those cows down there. Let's run down there and fuck one of them," and the dad says, "No, why don't we walk down and fuck them all?" Something like that. I'll tell you, it's, I used to spend too much time worrying about things in the vineyard that made me feel better, but didn't necessarily improve quality to the extent that I believed that they did.
Can you grab an example of that?
Oh, just
I'm hearing what you're saying. You did something because it makes me feel good, but was it for the better good or not?
yeah, just like the handwork and the hours and the backbreaking, just like like bonsaiing clusters, and so that there was like an even ripening, and nothing above a certain height in the canopy, and pulling leaves, and just everything was just, I was so maniacal about things needing to be done a certain way in the vineyard. And, just like everything else in life,
The maniacal part was a little overblown.
Yeah, I mean, I just was like, I was focusing on things that I should have been putting my efforts and energies into something else. But I instead was worried that if I left 4 berries on the upper left-hand wing of the Syrah cluster, that it was going to affect.
Obsessed?
Yeah, silly stuff.
God.
Yeah, what a waste of time. And so, and then like, we contracted this like old unruly Syrah vineyard, and it was just like more than halfway through the season. And it was like, I was like, oh, that we're never going to be able to, like get this thing in shape. We'll just make the wine and just use it as a learning experience, and maybe make some sort of like throwaway something, whatever. And it's a great vineyard, great soil, great selection, great site, but just like too much fruit, too much canopy, it does not look like what I want my Syrah vineyards to look like.
Do you go in and turn that around? I mean, does that guy let you do that?
Yeah,
you have the relationships where you're on the ground, not them?
Of course. But the point
that was a transitional thing.
Yeah, but the point of the story is that
the point.
The point is that the wine was fantastic. And it just means it just proves that soil and site and all of these things are way more powerful than some kid that thinks that you need to cut the cluster in this way. So
that's like an incredible realization and point. I mean, was there that realization with you? It's like, Jesus.
That's why I'm telling you the story.
Right. I mean, that's like the best. That's the best story.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, fuck me. I mean,
well, that's the whole point. Like in my youth, I was trying to do too much. I was spinning my wheels, worrying about things that weren't necessarily increasing the quality of the end product. They were just making me feel, but they were like, yeah. Anyway, so that's something that's changed a lot, right? Like now I'm a little bit more, I wouldn't say we're like pure Fukuoka method where we just kind of let things go, but I'm totally like at ease with something looking ratty, as long as it's still clean and farmed right. Like I would, it's like like my employees. It's like, I don't want you here every morning at 8:00 and sitting behind your desk on a beautiful day because that's your job. I want you to be productive. I want you to come in and work for 3 hours, but I want you to go for a hike. I want you to spend time with your significant other. And it's like, these are the things that we learn as we get older. And my point is, in telling the crass joke about the bull, is that, I would rather do so many other things in my life than to spend every waking moment in the vineyard, because it was proven,
you don't have to.
That we don't have to.
It does its own thing.
Ratty isn't bad to a degree, Yeah.
Well, things that that's the balance.
Right. It's like if your poodle is coiffed to look a certain way, it's still the same dog as the poodle with the bad haircut. So, you don't, so that's one lesson, is just kind of like, yes, the things have to be farmed well, things have to be farmed appropriately, but the other thing was, back in the early 2000s, like we were overwatering everything, grape growers like want to grow these huge vines so that they can go in and trim them.
To that.
Yeah, they can go in and trim them, and they can charge you for that.
About, and they want to go farming and the vines reaching for and concentration.
Yeah. But there's a balance.
You didn't know as much then as you do now. It evolved.
Yeah. Well, there's just there's status quo, and you trust that the status quo is based in fact. But it's we don't water near as much. We grow smaller vines now. We intentionally all the things that that, we've always heard and read about the old world, they all are based in, a qualitative decision. California was not always qualitative in its execution, or in its planting stages. People will plant these rootstocks and these material that are just high yielders and all of this stuff, and then you get a young kid that wants to come in and drop all the fruit and trim it all back, and you're kind of fighting against what it was created for. So now we're shifting more towards planting things a little bit more high quality based, and so we're not having to work so hard in the vineyard. We're not having to spend so much money on farming and overwatering these things to get them to grow and all this stuff. So yeah, these are the things that we learn as we get older, that we don't have to overwork and overthink these things. Wine is not made in the vineyard. Wine is made in the winery, of course, but you can't make good wine from bad grapes, and all the other cliches are true. It's like, I never studied winemaking, I go to Europe every year and spend time and wine
see how the great guys are doing
with the great winemakers of the world, and friends, and and stand on their shoulders and learn from what they're doing. But yeah, I don't know.
We talked earlier how, you had that epiphany, how wines were manipulated.
Yeah.
You talked about how your style changed, it evolved into what it is. That's philosophical. Are you swayed or pushed any way because of, I'll use the term like climate change or any changes? Do you have to think about that yet, or it's, coming? Because we're going to talk about the varietals you work with and why and all that. But as a general question.
Yeah. We were in a drought, a super drought in California, 2012 to 19, I guess. Climate change was really on our minds because the drought and the warming of the earth, and the hottest summers on record and the hottest temperatures reached every year. In 2022, we were like 115 degrees, for a couple days in a row. That's just not a Northern California thing. And so, yes, these things are on our mind. But now with all of the rain we've been getting the last couple of years, and it's all cyclical, but, 23 was a vintage that had more in common with, 95, 91, long vintage, cold vintage, great natural acidity, really good ripeness, but very late. So, it's like, is the climate changing? Yeah, I guess probably so. I think we all have seen the evidence of that, but we've had a total 180 degree reversal with our in 2011. Let's say we'll start at the beginning. In 2000 to 2011, we would pick Syrah vineyard. Or let's use Walker Vine Hill. We would pick Walker Vine Hill on October 15th. And then in 2012, it was, October 6th. And then in 2013, it was October 1st. And then come 2018, it's like September 5th.
Jesus. I mean, that's evidence.
But it was like, that's what we were saying. This is the new normal. Well, 23, we picked Walker Vine Hill in October, and it was some of the best grapes we've ever picked off the vineyard. So, it's like, maybe this year will maybe help us understand it a little better, which it looks like it's going to be another late one. So I don't know, maybe the new normal is the old normal, back to the new normal. I don't know. But the point is
interesting.
I think that it's very hard to answer the question. Everybody's looking for, everybody has a narrative that they want to have confirmed in regards to whether it's somebody changing the style of their wine, or somebody not drinking their own wine, or somebody or the climate changing. And I just think that I don't think that we know. I think that's
fair.
I think that the climate is.
But you specifically laid out, real instances.
But again, it's not. It's back now that we have rain.
Right. I'm not saying that you've
the drought's
proven
over.
anything or set a pattern. It's
Yeah.
actually just this, confusing and all of that.
Exactly.
And to be continued to be told and, figure it out. All right. So I'm also curious about, we talked about Syrah, your commitment to Syrah. We spent a decent amount. What drove you to work? When and what drove you to work with varietals beyond Syrah?
Yeah.
And were you kind of quietly doing it, or there was a time where you dug in and, they really flourished? Because we're talking about, I'll throw them out. Chenin Blanc, which we're drinking now and we're going to talk about, Trousseau Gris, Vermentino. These are not typical Gamay Noir. These are not typical California varietals.
Yeah.
And how'd that happen?
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, so let's start at the beginning of that statement.
All right, we're drinking a bottle of wine here.
Yeah, we're drinking a bottle of Chenin Blanc. But listen, why aren't they typical California grape varieties? Why?
I'm looking at you.
How did we get to the point where California became this monoculture of Cabernet and Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc? That's not how it started. But that's where.
So you're going somewhere, and I don't want you to forget where we're going, but Cabernet and Merlot, was Napa even the best place to grow these? Or they were good places for it?
Yeah, Napa's one of the best wine growing grape regions in the world.
All right, so go back to why weren't we growing these varietals?
No.
Or
listen, we were. All of these grape varieties existed in California. They were culled out because people were promoting.
What does culled out mean? They just pull them?
Yeah, no. Because the market, because the people, because the kingmakers were saying that we should only be growing Cabernet in Napa.
Wasting money and time.
Listen. I had this interview with Wine Spectator a couple years ago, and they never even published it. They didn't even know what to do with it. They said to me,
you got them dizzy.
They said this is you're making a Vermentino that's $26 at the time. That's just so weird. And I'm like, what's fucking weird? The fact that you think an $80 bottle of Chardonnay is normal and that a $26 bottle of Vermentino is weird. I said, that's fucked up. I'm like, you guys are fucking insane.
They don't want to hear that.
They did not want to hear that. Of course not.
Well, but
it's true. Why is that normal? Why did California become a monoculture? Why was it only Cabernet? Why was it only Bordeaux grape varieties? Why was it only Chardonnay? That's boring. Now there's people that are planting all this stuff. We're doing it. We're buying grapes from old vineyards that are in threat of being pulled out. We're bringing grape varieties in.
So the question, get specific with me, was when and why. When, I'm curious why you're starting to explain. These are great varietals. They were there.
Because it's like if Syrah is on the verge of not succeeding because everybody only wants to drink Cabernet and Syrah, then we've got a serious problem. We need to normalize Syrah. How do we normalize Syrah? We plant Trousseau Gris. We grow Chenin Blanc. We have Gamay Noir. We fucking show people what the idiosyncratic, what the esoteric stuff truly is, because Syrah is a true, one of the greatest, most noble grape varieties on the planet. So I think, that was kind of the thinking. People have to diversify their drinking. People can't drink. You should not be drinking Silver Oak by the pool in July. You should be drinking.
I wish you and I can convince more people, but people are stuck in that.
Yeah, you should be drinking your bottles of Silver Oak with a steak, with your boys at a steakhouse. That's when you do that. You should be drinking something light and bright, or beer, or non-alcoholic wine, or other things. It's there's so much out there in the world to enjoy these things, whether it's Chenin Blanc from South Africa, or Cinsault from South Africa, or a
varietal that you're not familiar with growing from a region. You know, you
Yeah.
think one varietal's from the southern Rhone.
Yeah.
Try it. You know,
You could find your
I think
new.
discovery is the greatest thing.
Yes, exactly. And there's so much there.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, there's enough suitable places in California, and you found them to grow Syrah, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of is, before I segue into Halcon, because that was a good segue, give people an idea. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, philosophy, what you're doing, what's going on in the world. When we talk about your winery, I mean, give people an idea. I mean, you're making upwards, what, a dozen different wines a year? 8, 10, 6, 12, 13, 11. I mean, you know, it's not a casual thing, right? We mentioned Chenin Blanc and, you know, different SKUs of Syrah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a busy guy in that sense, right?
Yes, very.
And I mentioned earlier you're dealing with at least a dozen plus different sites,
Oh, yeah.
right? So, I mean, some are sites specific, some are. So on a typical vintage year, and everything's based on the vintage, you'll make how many different wines?
No idea.
Okay. More than 3, less than 20?
I can confirm more than 3.
You're not sure about less than 20.
Listen, we have 4 Chenin Blanc vineyards. We have 5 Gamay vineyards. We have 18 Syrah vineyards.
Wow.
These aren't all bottled on their own.
No, I understand.
But, yeah.
So your commitment to these varietals based on, you know, sites is, you know, obviously there. I mean, that's a nice thing. So as much as you could look at Pax, you know, as a great Syrah maker, you have to pay attention that the commitments, you know, to Chenin and all of that.
Listen.
I'm not sure everyone knows that.
People, of course not. People, you know, it's great, you know, like the fact that Chenin Blanc has probably been mentioned 5 or 6 times in this interview today. It's like, you know, the fact that people are drinking it, the fact that there's
From
like
California.
this resurrection. Yeah, there's so many cool wines, California Chenin Blancs that are being made right now. It's super exciting. But listen, like, that's great. I love that. I think that might be where Syrah went wrong in California, right? Everybody was like, "Ooh, Syrah's cool. Let's make Syrah," and it sucked. And like people were like, "Ooh, I like the label. I'm going to buy that." "Ooh, I don't like Syrah." So
it's like Riesling to some people.
Sure, exactly. And so, you know, I think that was the problem with Syrah. There was just an ocean of garbage, and it really affected the really hype people that were serious about it. And the serious people are still doing it, obviously, and still making good wine. And I think I love the fact that I see all these cool Chenin Blancs coming out and blah, blah, blah. But I think that was the problem with Syrah, that people were just kind of like, "Ooh, we're going to make that because it's cool. We can sell it to our wine club, or we can sell it to our distributors." And then, you know, somebody tries the wine because somebody says it's the best wine, the Chenin Blanc from California, and they should try it. And people taste it like, "Oh, I guess I just don't like Chenin Blanc."
Okay.
And that's a problem, right? Because listen, we've planted these Chenin Blanc vineyards in California. We haven't been responsible for all of this. We have helped certain growers. We have found material for other people. We are like, you know, this vineyard that we're drinking, the Lyman Ranch in Amador. I mean, this was an old Zinfandel planting on top of a mountain outside of Plymouth. And it was this bright red granite. And, you know, it was all Zinfandel planted in the 60s. And this guy, Josh, bought it. And he's like,
he pulled the Zinfandel?
No, he budded on top. So he just like took 5-acre blocks, and he reached out to us because he wanted to plant Syrah for us up there. And I was like, Chenin, I want the Chenin. So we planted Chenin, and this is like, you know, we can't grow this in Sonoma County. We don't have granite on top of a mountain in Sonoma County. You know, this thing is like
important to the characteristics.
Yeah,
of this
for
wine.
sure.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
talk about it.
but you know, before I would pick great Chenin Blanc grown on granite, you know, I was in the Loire Valley for weeks, tasting and learning and discovering and temperature fermentation. I mean, that's 15 Chenin Blanc that you have in your bag. I mean, that was like 32 different fermentations.
Jesus.
Like when Patrick came to the winery, and like we coded, and so Jamie and I went to the Loire Mahle, and like, you know, like we coded the ferments. So, you know, like Rougeard ferments hot in steel, or hot in wood. You know, Ghiberto ferments, you know, cold in steel. So, you know, like Collier does this. So like we did like hot in stainless steel, cold in stainless steel, you know, ambient in stainless steel.
That's
like,
so funny.
like new wood, old wood, big wood, small barrels, you know, cigar barrels, you know, concrete eggs, concrete cubes, you know.
Any kind of vessel.
Yeah, no, so we could learn, you know. And like we coded them, you know, and so, you know, those first couple of vintages and learning and seeing what people were doing in the Loire and seeing what people were doing in South Africa and all over the world making great Chenin Blanc, you know, just kind of like learning from that and then applying it to our sites. And, you know, so what we're doing with Chenin Blanc is, you know, it's not a hobby, you know. It's we're really trying to change the face.
Casual thing.
Yeah, it's not a casual thing. We're trying to, and there's other people.
You want to enter the contest and win.
That's right. That's right. You know? Yeah. Oh yeah. No. 100%.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that. You know, the type of guy that you are. You know, like we said, it's not a casual thing, and I love that because it's a great varietal.
Yeah. Listen, I drink this wine. You know what I mean? You know, it's, you know, this thing, people don't drink their own wines, or people like California people don't. You know what? I drink and you know, this used to be like something you wouldn't admit. You wouldn't be like, oh, I sit around, I drink my own wine. You know, it was more cool to say like, I drink wines from Europe and I drink everything. You know what? I make some of the best Syrah from anywhere. And so,
and you want to drink it, try it, test it.
Well, I want to drink it,
enjoy it,
because I want to drink Syrah.
Right.
And you know, I
guess who's making good Syrah? Me.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll open a bottle of Dard Rebo. I drink, you know, cases that go on a year. I mean, I drink tons of Alamo.
Like
I drink
you talked
all
about the Chenin. You looked at all these legendary producers just to see what they're doing. But that's along with drinking it. All right, let's finish up with something that I think is interesting, and that's your recent project, Halcon. To me, just from what I know about you, it seems like a dream come true. You know, here's like an opportunity to work with Syrah and work with your estate grown, because not longer than 3 minutes ago, we talked about, you know, the sites that you work with and all of that. Tell me what Halcon is. It's Syrah. You have a cool partner. You have 15 something acres. It's, you know, where are we at? What is it? What's going on? What to expect?
Well, it's 200 plus acres with 15 planted to vine. It is the top of a mountain in Yorkville Highlands.
One of the highest, right?
One of the highest. As you're driving from, you take Highway 128 out of like Alexander Valley, which is cab country, and you climbing up into Anderson Valley, which is Pinot Noir country. There's this little in-between appellation called the Yorkville Highlands, which is, you know, just like a really perfect place for Syrah. Climate-wise, the soils are one of a kind for California.
What are they, like schist?
Mica schist, yeah.
Mica schist?
I mean, very common in the Northern Rhone. This is the only vineyard in California that I know of that's planted in mica schist.
I just had Luis Seabra on, and he has a wine called Schisto, which is schist.
Yeah.
Mica, different white wine, different region, but important. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So perfect soils.
Amazing soil, yeah. And it would be a good place for Chenin Blanc, but I don't know how eager my partner and I are for, you know, having to sell a Chenin Blanc for $80 to $100. I mean, it's very expensive to acquire land in California. If you're a bootstrap partnership, if you're not made of money and you actually have to get a return on your investment, you know, things have to cost a certain amount of money. And
so your partner, Baron Ziegler, kind of an interesting guy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, not a bad podcast with him, probably.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, he's done some notable, fun stuff.
Absolutely.
How, you've known him for a while. Yeah. How does this Halcon, you and him thing come together?
So it was, well, the long and short of it is that during COVID, we all kind of found our pods and kind of found people that we trusted weren't out, gonna kill us by getting infected. And so like you would just kind of hang out with a certain small group of people.
Sneak to somebody's pool.
Exactly.
Outside,
Yeah.
right?
So we would spend time at Barron's pool and outside, and my wife would be like, "You're staying outside." Oh yeah, we're staying outside. And so it was a night, and it was interesting because we were there was another opportunity that was a potential opportunity for some Syrah grown down in the Chalone appellation. The Chalone winery is owned by a guy that Barron has done business with, and there's some discussion with do we like resurrect this thing and kind of do this and then because we could do it. You're like, he's a dynamic salesperson, and he's like very very out there, like really he's very social. I'm not extremely social.
You're not unsocial, but
Sure,
you may be
sure.
more type A.
Yeah. And so
you're a winemaker,
Yeah.
a little more insular. He's sales, import.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's like, he's like, we should grow, we should, that would be a cool thing. And then was kind of like, well, Halcon's for sale. What would we do with that? And so the conversation was like, well, we just be like have an estate winery and just like, make.
When was that?
This was 2020. We bought it and closed in 2021.
That was during COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
Did COVID have an effect on how
Yeah,
the business stuff played out and all that?
Yeah, because we because we were having the conversations, sitting in the jacuzzi, like just like focusing on Syrah, like doing this estate thing. It's not a new thing, to have an estate vineyard and make an estate wine. It happens all over Europe, and some people are doing it in California, obviously. But we thought that would be a very important kind of opportunity to just like have this one estate wine, have an estate that just made one wine.
Kind of a dream.
Yeah.
So where are we at? I mean, have you made wine yet? Or are you?
Oh yeah. The 21
How
is.
old are the vines? Are they 15, 20-year-old vines?
Yep. The vines were planted in.
Right arm and edit that part out.
And we're back.
And we're back.
So yes, the 21 wines are in the market. The 21 wines are here in New York
So
City.
21 is the first
21 is the
Halcon vintage?
That's correct. Under our ownership.
Right. Your control.
And I think you asked a question that I didn't answer. The vines were they started planting the vineyard in 2005. The majority was planted in 2006.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
18, 20 years.
Yeah. It's so funny because everybody that looked at the vineyard to buy the vineyard, everybody went to the vineyard and wanted to tear the vines out and replant and, make it more pretty and make it more pristine. And I was like, Barron was like, well, everybody.
Same old crap.
Yeah, Barron's like, everybody says this needs to be replanted, and I'm like, no, this is what the best vineyards in the Northern Rhone Valley look like. This is exactly.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is this the Northern Rhone in California? And you would know.
Listen, there are, I'd say the greatest vineyards of Syrah are in the Northern Rhone Valley. I would say that this vineyard is not in the top 5 with the top Syrah vineyards in the Northern Rhone Valley, but it's in the top 10.
Okay. Which for California.
Yeah.
You know what I'm always curious about? So this is an extraordinarily exciting project. Like I kind of led into it. I mean, it's like a dream come true.
For sure, 100%.
Do you think like the 21 wines are going to be so different than the wines 8 years from now, just because of what you learned, or from vine age or climate? It's like, hey Sam, remember you and I talked about that? The wines are so different now.
I don't think so, Sam. I don't think so. Listen,
it is what it is.
Listen, the first vintage, pardon me, of Griffin's Lair Syrah was 2002. Okay, kind of Pax 1.0 heyday. This wine was 13.7% alcohol. The 2022 Griffin's Lair Syrah that is on the market, or going to be released onto the market later this year, is 13.7% alcohol. Okay, so things change, but vineyards. Yes, maybe we find a new cooperage, or maybe,
right.
but no
tweaks, or maybe a little.
Always tweaks.
But the vision is there, and it's not going to kind of deviate much.
No, the goal is not to deviate. The goal is to make one of the best Syrahs on the planet.
Because when we talked about Pax from 2000, 2004, 5, there was some deviations and epiphanies and all of that.
Of course.
But I think you learned what you need to learn, and you have.
Hey, listen, Sam, if you're shaving your face and you cut yourself, you're not going to do that again. You're going to change your behavior, and all your friends are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you changed so dramatically how you shave your face.
All right, last two questions. This is a pretty cool project. I mean,
what's that? Halcon. Oh yeah.
Is this going to quell your desire to do other stuff, and you need to go head down, or is there more stuff you want to do?
No, I don't. No, I mean, I'm old. I'm tired.
You're not that old. You're not that tired. I used to meet my father for lunch. And I was maybe 30. He'd go, how you doing? I'd say, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And I was, he goes, you're tired?
Yeah.
You're 30.
Yeah,
I'm like 65. What are you tired from?
Yeah.
What are you tired from?
When Jimmy Buffett passed this last year, I saw some interviews out, and I saw a great interview with Jimmy Buffett, and he said, I'm getting older, but I'm not old. I guess that's kind of how I feel. But I do.
He's right.
Yeah.
You embrace that. I embrace that.
Yeah.
Whatever my age is, I don't think like a guy my age.
Yeah.
Physically, I don't either. And that's you too. So when you said you were tired, it's kind of like bitching and moaning bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, you have way more energy and vision,
right?
Than most people.
Yeah.
So God bless Jimmy Buffett. All right, we got to wrap this up. I've had you here forever because we got to do the wine list, which we got to buzz through, and I just want to do a quick evaluation. But I want to ask you a question. My middle son Jake's been to 150 plus Fish concerts. Are you anywhere near that? I mean, he went to school in Burlington, Vermont, worked for the band.
He worked for the band.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
in
cool.
Burlington.
Yeah.
So, but he's obsessed. So he's been to, how many concerts you been to?
Oh, I think I hit the 150 mark quite a few years ago.
Oh, you are up there. I wasn't sure if you were a little, so you're, you know what I have to do? Off air, I got to get his number, and then I got to get your number.
Please do.
And then when I, post all that.
Please do.
All right. So what I love about Fish, because I was into it before him, what I love about Fish, and longtime Deadhead. I mean, I was probably to 150 Dead concerts,
amazing,
which may have inspired my kid. And I'm a huge Miles fan.
Oh yeah,
huge Coltrane. These guys are all. I don't like to call them jam bands. Well, certainly Miles and Coltrane weren't jam bands, but Fish and the Dead became jam bands. They're more improvisational to me. Is there a parallel between winemakers and not all musicians, but improvisational?
Yes.
What is it?
Yes.
Because you must be inspired, you more than anyone.
Yes. Yes, 100%. 100%. I obsess over old Miles Davis recordings, and there's this great session with him and Coltrane, and Miles says,
where he's talking.
Yeah, he's like,
hey, why are you blowing like that?
Yeah, he's like, do you ever try taking it out of your mouth? Like stop playing for a second. Listen, in order to create something original, in order to be in the moment and to create something that is just completely magical, there are going to be some missteps along the way. There's going to be times where it doesn't work out really well. There's going to be times where you achieve something that is just extraordinary. You got to try. And I find that I am very much fearless in trying. And you have to be. Because if you start thinking about the financial implication or the this or the that, you have to wear all hats, but you cannot stifle your creativity. You can't be afraid to try to get there.
Parallel lessons.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that's
you're not Miles, who went through all these iterations.
Yeah.
You know, from mainstream to fusion without, you know, having the balls to try this. And
exactly. Yeah.
And you do that.
Yeah.
And that's an inspiration.
Well, you know, there's the, you know, like Pablo Picasso was sitting in a restaurant and a woman walked up to him and said, you know, can you draw me a picture? He said, sure. He drew a little doodle on a napkin and he handed it to her. He said, that'll be $10,000. And she said, it took you 2 minutes. And he goes, it took me 80 years.
Right. People forget that. All right, let's finalize and move on. I do a thing called the wine list. I ask all my guests 5 questions. I ask everyone the same 5 questions.
And you don't give us the questions ahead of time?
I don't give them to you ahead of time, but they're on the goddamn podcast. You're either too unprepared, too lazy, or not give a crap to say, hey, I'm sitting with this guy. Let me see what the 5 questions are. I love that because the spontaneity. We're at the point where we've been here a long time, and I don't want to keep you longer. Okay. So buzz through these.
Okay.
This isn't science.
Speed round.
Speed round, okay. You know, don't dwell in all that. Okay. But give me your real thoughts. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? What do you drink and what's in your fridge? Seasonal changes. When you travel, do you drink things on the road? Do you have to do stuff like for work? Like, let me taste Shannon's from, like you said, South Africa. What are you drinking now?
Yeah, all of those things. Yes, and yes. I do all of those things. What am I drinking? I drink a lot of champagne.
Okay.
It's like my wife and I. That's
funny how everyone says that because it's the greatest drink other than what we all drink.
Yeah.
Do you have favorites?
Of course I have favorites.
Can you name me 1 or 2?
I mean, they're all the same favorites as everybody else. But,
okay.
But no,
not like Salas because it's too expensive. We all love that.
I actually don't like. I mean, I
you don't like that oxidative?
I like the son's wines. You know, and I know he now makes the dad's wines now too, and I like his style, which is a little bit more laser beam and pure, and which that's my style. So that's kind of my deal.
You said champagne. What else?
I mean, you know, crispy, fresh. I love like, you know, like Alpine wines, like, you know, Alto Adige whites or Savoie whites or anything that is like, or like, you know, that like melted mountain spring water, freshness and vibrancy and or like opulence, just like that really like soft, but like really vibrant, like sake, like Savoie white. They just have this kind of like delicate freshness to them, and I love that.
So I was invited to Alto Adige this time last year.
Yeah.
And the last thing I need is a free trip or whatever, but I was so intrigued going into the wines and a chance to go there. And because I knew so little, you know, it's a very cooperative thing. And then there's a handful of guys like Hofstetter in Toronto that are in. The wines were amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, my friends that don't know shit about shit drink Pinot Grigio. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about Pinot Grigio, you know, go up there. So those were interesting wines to me. All right, question 2. Favorite wine and food pairing? Goofiest question on the list. Not what you and I think is a great wine, food, and pairing, but what you like as a favorite wine. Obviously, you don't eat it, you know, regularly.
Listen, of course, we
have a rule. You can't say champagne and oysters.
Thank you. Or champagne and fried chicken, right?
And pizza, which 50 times.
No, but listen, you know, like, there's always, you know, in your evolution and your discovery and your drinking and eating, you're always going to find these like magical kind of things. Listen, I think that we we put a lot of pressure on the enophile, on the people that are just getting into wine, thinking that they have to have the right food with the right wine. I think people should realize that you can drink anything you want and eat anything you want. And yes, you're going to find some sort of magical kind of thing that works for you. And I think that's amazing. And I hope it's like oddball, like, smoked mussels and, Turlano, whatever. I don't care. But for
try.
Yeah. But so listen,
No rules.
For me, I'm happiest sipping something and picking on a like shrimp cocktail, some oysters, some crab legs, whatever, something that's just drinkable, something that's light, something that's easy, something that's fresh, but like some cheese and some charcuterie. Like, I love snacking. My favorite meal is snacks. I love I don't want to olives. Yes, right? God, I love olives. Yeah. Olives and nuts and meat and cheese and seafood, and meat, just all these little tiny bites. I love little tiny bites of salty, flavorful things and a really easy white wine.
That's a good answer, because it's kind of a real answer. It's sort of like we all love snacks and different cheeses and salty snacks and all that.
My dinner 4 nights a week is snacks.
Do that and, pick a wine, and like you kind of end it, it's usually like a crisp white wine.
Yeah,
but, it could be anything.
That's my happy place.
All right, third question. And I'm not asking you this to make it difficult or to leave friends out. I'm asking you just to get your take on it. The question is your favorite wine restaurant and or bar. And the question sort of is, who's got the good wine list? Who's got the good vibe? Who has the knowledgeable people? It could be at home, not far out of Sebastopol. It could be in your travels in New York. And I'm going to disclaim this for you. If you answer it, whoever you answer, this is not your top 3, 1, 2, 3. These are just places that have come to mind that do it well. Can you do that?
Yeah, listen, it is a tough question.
And you're in the business and you want to kind of not appease, but you want to be fair to everyone. But like I just said, so if you mention Chambers, Pascaline, Lepeltier, that doesn't make it the number. She's just one of the people that do it well, and there's others.
Yeah. I'll tell you. There's a lot of great restaurants in New York City. There's a lot of great restaurants all over the world, right, that have these incredible wine lists. And I could rattle off so many of them. But there is one place that I go, and every time I walk in the door, I feel butterflies in my stomach. And I feel like I am privileged to be there. And I feel like I'm about to have something really special. And that place is Zuni Cafe.
Zuni.
Yeah.
So you're right. That place merits that for the food, the reputation, the wine list, everything I said.
There's better wine lists. There's better restaurants.
Right. And nobody can complain to you like, why didn't you mention my place? Serious? I said Zuni. You're right there too.
There's so many places that have better restaurants.
So
better
we're
lists.
locking in on that answer and moving along.
Yeah.
Fourth question. Here's the question. Favorite all-time wine? When I initially asked this question, it was, what's the most rare, expensive wine you ever tasted?
Yeah.
Don't give a crap about that.
Yeah.
That was a great question to Aldo Sohm.
Yeah.
But Aldo taught me a lesson. He goes, I'm not telling you my most expensive wine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He goes, let me tell you the wine that had, what's the wine that had the most influence on you, that was important to you, that was transitional, that woke you up? Was it a Syrah that made you the Syrah guru?
Right.
What's that important wine?
I don't know if the wine that popped into my head when you asked me that question, I don't know if this wine is that wine, but it is the one that comes to mind. So there must be.
We're talking the now, and that's fine.
But it's not Syrah. It's not something that I think changed my viewpoint on anything. I think it was just like the wine that kind of, left me a little speechless. And that was the 1978 Kalina Rionda from, who's that? Giacosa.
Wait, so Giacosa, Kalina Rionda?
Yeah, red label, Giacosa red label. Colina Rionda.
Collina.
Yeah.
And spell the second part for me.
RHON Rion or RHIONDA. Rionda.
I'll look it up.
Yeah,
Do
Colina
you remember
Rionda.
what year? Or
78.
78,
Red Label Reserva.
When did you drink that?
Doug Plonner and I bought the bottle off of the list from a young sommelier working the floor named Robert Bohr at Washington Square Park.
Not even Veritas. Or
Oh, no, it wasn't Washington Square Park. It was the one after Washington Square Park.
Veritas?
No. It was, what did Washington Square?
Crew?
Yes, Crew.
Crew.
It had been renamed Crew at that point. Yeah.
Right.
So Robert Bohr was on the floor, and he
They knew.
decanted the bottle for Doug and I.
He knew. That's a good one. I like that answer.
Yeah.
I didn't mention this. I post all the answers on social media.
Awesome.
The reason I ask
saw
you
that.
this, I think it's fun that
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
like, what's Pax thinking and drinking?
Yeah.
And it's not just Pax, but Pax is great, but it's the body of all, like, what did Louis Syrah like last week, and what's
Yeah.
Andy Shabak going to like
Yeah.
next week, blah, 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 and all that. All right, last question. Best wine around $15 retail, a red and a white, 15, 20, 22, 25. I don't know if that's hard for you. You're a winemaker, not a som, not a retailer. You can give me category like Muscadet is a pretty good category if you find the right maker for the price. My kids are in their late 20s.
Well, I don't know that there are good $15 bottles of wine anymore. I think all those
Really?
I think all those wines are now 22 these days.
So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking Monterey Cellars Vermentino.
Great answer.
I'm thinking Vincent Dompt Petit Chablis with a screw top.
Vincent who?
Dompt,
Spell.
DAMPT.
And that's a Chablis,
Chablis.
from Chablis in France?
Yeah, Petit Chablis. So
Petit
it's across.
Chablis.
Yeah.
And you think it's $25? 20?
I think it's 20,
Wow.
22, 23
Nobody
bucks.
has ever said that.
Screw top.
You know, you talk about Tribute and...
Yeah, I love Tribute.
But this could even
Tribute's
be...
$80 now.
Yeah.
US, yeah, $20. It's screw
So
top.
that's our white. Can you think of a red?
I don't drink that much red wine unless it's nice Syrah.
In general?
In general, probably something like there must be like an aromatic Italian red that's from Sicily that is like, oh, you know who it is? It's who's that producer in Sicily that makes those really juicy light wines with the
Not Cos, C-O-S.
Oh no, not I love their wines, yes, of course. But no, there's a producer. Maybe I'll send it to you.
You'll send it to me and
Yeah,
I'll put it on.
but it's
you're
like-
talking about a Sicilian red.
Like aromatic, light bodied, no wood.
Good value in Sicily.
Yeah,
I agree
but
with
very soulful. Not like
Right.
Not
just, sending it in.
yeah.
They're making good wines anyway. All right, so like I said, we'll post that. We got to wrap this up. So every week at the end of the show, we taste a different wine. I call it the weekly wine sip.
Yep.
Why wouldn't I sit across from a winemaker and say, bring a wine and let's taste it?
Yep.
So you brought the Lyman Ranch 23 Pax Mahle Chenin Blanc, Amador County.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
me about this wine.
This is a gorgeous vineyard. It was Zinfandel vines that were planted.
So we just polished the bottle off during.
Yeah.
But this was such a long podcast. It's not like we're even. But all right, so go ahead.
So this was an old vineyard planted to Zinfandel. The current owner, budded over these 5-acre blocks of. There's Chenin, there's Grenache, there's Vermentino, there's all sorts of different grape varieties. Now we contract for the entire block of Chenin. This is planted in bright red granite. It's Amador County. It's
Visually, it's bright red.
yeah. It looks like Mars. Yeah, it's like deep brick red.
Is there anything else like that?
El Dorado Gold Country is kind of and when you get into El Dorado, it's a little bit more like golden, lighter in color.
Right.
This is more brick, like smushed brick.
Taste red.
Yeah,
Like,
to me,
character.
this wine has so much like grip and tannin and like mouth-watering
grabbing the side.
Yeah,
This
like
in your palate. It gets you
it's like
over
this
there.
minerality that like grips the side of your face. and that's from the Granite. This is fermented all in Stockinger 500-liter puncheons, which is a barrel that is brought in from Austria. So it's Austrian and German wood that doesn't taste of wood or oak.
But not stainless.
This, some stainless or some concrete, but it's mostly about 30% new Stockinger and about 60% used Stockinger, and then some concrete.
So this may be a silly question, but as a reference, I think South Africa is making some decent Chenin Blanc.
Yes.
Certainly the Loire Valley is
Yes.
famous. Stylistically, where does it emulate those? Is it similar? Does it have its own personality?
Yeah, well, hopefully, it's obvious. Well, I don't always say obvious. I think that it clearly has California fruit, but I think it has a real delicate, high acid minerality that you don't find from a lot of California wines, at least that have this much length and this much texture and this much body.
All right, so we have to do a quick evaluation. First, we look at the color. It's got that light straw color.
Yeah, almost green.
Light green, yellow. All right, now nose. I suck at the nose descriptors. What does this wine throw out as far as nose?
It's woolly today because it's very young. It's waxy.
Okay.
It's like some tangerine peel.
Okay. Getting that.
Grapefruit pith.
You said woolly?
Woolly.
Like a woolly sweater?
Yeah.
That's the first thing I got.
Yeah.
I never used that description. It's definitely woolly.
You asked the question. I'm just trying to answer
it's
it.
so fucking woolly. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
All right. So now mouthfeel.
Intense.
Solid medium, not a thin, not an unctuous wine, but really fills the mouth in a nice way.
Yeah.
Agreed?
Yeah. Tons of acidity, tons of length and texture.
What about palate? I don't know if you could replicate woolly in the palate. What do you get in the palate here?
Just lots of wet rocks.
Wet rocks, any fruit indications?
I get like grapefruit. I get some like tart white peach.
More tart white peach than grapefruit.
Yep.
So this is available now, right?
This is just coming to the market.
So this is Pax Mahle's Chenin Blanc from Amador County. It's Lyman Ranch. It's vintage 2023. I love it. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting here or whatever, but we've been drinking it for upwards of an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful
Not
wine.
only have we been drinking it, but we have now drunk it.
And Pax brought a bunch of bottles of wine, and we haven't touched one of them. So we're pros. All right, Pax, we got to wrap up. Let me do a quick wrap up. Then I want to get some info from you. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. Leave a review if you like the podcast. If you subscribe, the podcast shows up. There's Pax. Follow us on Instagram at SBenRuby and on X Twitter at BenRuby. 2 different handles, BenRuby, SBenRuby. But you can always find us with the hashtag The Grape Nation. We're on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we'll post Pax's wine list, all those great answers, and I will give you all the information on the weekly wine sip on our social media. Where can we find more about your wines? Obviously,
PaxWine.com.
And everything's there. All the background. Can you buy wines and all that stuff?
Yep.
Plus, it's available at great stores and restaurants. And
Absolutely.
And all that. Where can we find all this stuff on social media?
So my personal is at Pax Mahle, PaxMahle.
That's you.
That's me.
What about the winery?
The winery is Pax Wines, PaxWines.
Okay. So you should follow both. You should see where, like, for instance, Pax is in New York right now. And if you follow him, you'll see where he's eating tonight. I'll give you a hint, Roscioli, but in the next few days, he'll be at some cool places where the winemakers eat. So follow the winery to see what's going on and follow Pax to see what he's doing. All right, I want to thank my guest, Pax Mahle. Thank you to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.